Hi, welcome to the MCB Community Update. I'm your host, Eric Joseph, Executive Director of the Audible Local Ledger, part of the Massachusetts Audio Information Network, or MAIN, which provides reading services across the state of Massachusetts to people who are blind or print disabled. The MCB Community Update will interview Commissioner John Oliveira quarterly, and it will speak with other members of the MCB to find out more about the services and support that MCB offers the blind community. We welcome feedback and any suggested questions that you might want asked. Now, here is this month's MCB Community Update. Good morning. Our guest this month on MCB Community Update is Rehabilitation Teaching Supervisor at MCB, Carolyn Oveson, and we're lucky enough to have one of her teammates with us, Rehabilitation Teacher Susana Bergantim. I'm eager to speak with Carolyn and Susana today because, well, I've been involved with reading services for almost 15 years and I haven't met either person. I love learning from professionals with a lot of experience about new services or programs that might be beneficial to my listeners or their consumers. So let's dig in. Carolyn and Susana, how are you this morning?
Great. Thank you.
Doing pretty well, thank you.
Here we go. I can't, it's May, but it feels a little like a fall day. So
it is chilly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. So, as we get started, maybe each of you could tell us a little bit about your work history, how you came to MCB. Is this something that you've always been involved with, state agency work or assisting people who are disabled in some manner? And Carolyn, why don't you start? Let us know how you got there.
So in a few weeks, actually, I think June 4th is my anniversary date, will mark 26 years for me with the Commission for the Blind.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I started out my career at MCB as a rehabilitation teacher and going on the road, servicing individuals who are blind and visually impaired and teaching them, doing all the skills that they need. And then I moved into the rehab teaching supervisor position about, I want to say maybe 20 years ago. So it was a transition for me to go from being a teacher to supervising the unit. And I've enjoyed the team that I've had ever since. We've had some people leave, we've had new people come, but I think that, we're really proud down here in Region 5 that we have such a strong team and a great advocacy for rehab teaching that we do. My background is I've always wanted to help people. I've always wanted to work with people. So I had a background in psychology, background in occupational therapy, and then got my master's in education from UMass Boston. And I also was an orientation and mobility instructor. So for MCB, I've kind of done a lot of different things. I've been a case manager, rehab teacher, mobility instructor, supervisor. So kind of, jack of all trades, but master of none for sure.
Fabulous.
Master of plenty.
Susana, how about you?
Well, it's interesting because my background wasn't in human services to begin with. It was actually in the private sector. I worked for 10 years in the private sector and then they closed their doors and I was left saying, okay, it's time to redirect my career path. And I came across, the need for some clerical background working at MCB. So I started as an ADA specialist. And then from there on, I was just so taken with the purpose of the agency. And because of that, I couldn't think of myself anywhere else. So I started pursuing education, asking questions about where my path would lead and here. And I loved rehab teaching. And Carolyn, at that time, I was already lucky enough to know her as a supervisor because we worked hand in hand with the fiscal aspect of things. And then it just kind of continued from there. So I've been working with the agency. Ironically enough, July will be my 20th year here. And within the agency, I've been doing rehab teaching for a good 14 years. Carolyn can probably speak to whether I'm right around that time frame, but time just kind of flies. When you love what you do, you don't even really count track of the numbers of years. It's more like another day to help someone, make a friend, make a connection. And that's what it's all about at MCB for me. So
Yeah, you love the mornings when you can look in the mirror and kind of like what's looking back because you're doing good work. I know that feeling. I love it myself. And congratulations to both of you for such a long and storied career. So, how about outlining a little bit for the listener and the some of the viewers that we have, some of the specific areas of instruction? When you say, I'm a rehabilitation teacher, I know that's an umbrella that must cover an awful lot of material. So, would you mind kind of going through and tell us, what exactly is that? What are the things you're teaching, and how diverse are they? um, and where you feel your instruction may be most beneficial to some of the people that you're working with.
So Eric, we have what's called a diagnostic inventory that we have, and it's a basic set of a number of questions. Now, not every question applies to every person. So what we do is very person specific, but we have the diagnostic available to hit on all these questions should a person have a need. So it's quite cumbersome for me to go through the entire diagnostic. So what Susana and I are going to do is I'm going to take a handful of topics and then I'll pass it off to her. And then this way it'll kind of even out a little bit. Kind of
Terrific.
we picked the most popular things that mostly everyone can benefit from. But please know that this is not the entire list because we work with people that are independent in some ways and need independent instruction in other ways, but then also things that we bring up that they would have never thought that they would need help with.
Hmm.
So it's very cumbersome. And we talk about everybody's activities of daily living, which is ADLs, but those can range from making a cup of coffee to making a Thanksgiving dinner. So you can see the range that you can have something simple to very complex.
Of course.
So the first few topics I'm going to talk about, one of them is appliance markings. So when you think about the appliances that we use every day, think about the microwave, because most people have a microwave in their homes, and a microwave tends to have a flat panel. Now, when I started, we had microwaves that were dials. You could turn the dial and turn it to how much time you wanted, and they were much simpler. But as time has gone on, the appliances have become more sophisticated. Same thing with washing machines. They used to have a dial to turn to a certain setting. Now everything is flat panel. So if you're blind or visually impaired and you have difficulty finding where you need to touch something, we can put what's called a bump dot or a tactile marker on a specific part of the microwave. So a lot of microwaves have what's called a minute plus button or a start button. So we can mark the microwave in a certain way so that they can find a specific setting, and we can mark things textually. We can mark them with white colored bumps, orange colored bumps, black colored bumps, different sizes, different colors, different textures, even different shapes. So to differentiate things. We can mark people's phones, for example. So if you can find the number 5 on a phone, then you're able to dial a phone because it's in a grid pattern. If you find the number 5, we mark it, it's in the center. Then from there, we can teach people where to reach the other numbers to dial something. So appliance markings go from, like I said, the kitchen, we mark stoves, we mark washing machines, we mark what are they called? Dials for your heating elements. So you need to put the thermostat up, the thermostat down. So it varies in whatever people need. And sometimes we found unique ways to mark things, and other things we can't adapt because they're just not able to be adapted. But we try to do what we can for the client. And not everybody needs the same adaptation, but that's a simple way to explain what appliance markings are. And almost everyone can use some sort of bump dot, either to identify a key or, like I said, something on a microwave.
I get the bump dot. It makes a lot of sense. Anything that you can, any raised item. Do you ever use Braille at all? Is that ever, instruction in Braille that they would be able to use that way, or is it all tactile dots?
So Braille is a tactile way to communicate and for people to read. We use Braille on a limited basis for the people that either know it or are learning it,
Mhm.
because Braille is sort of a cumbersome thing to learn as you get older. It's like teaching a person a foreign language in their elder years because Braille is definitely a tactile representation of the words. So they have to have the ability to feel it and the ability to understand and learn the common areas of how the dots are made in order to form letters and words. So we do use Braille, but it's not as common as we would just a simple bump dot to make something as accessible.
Understood. Makes sense.
We also talk about people's eating skills and their ability to use contrast with eating. So when people have, for example, they want to have spaghetti and they're going to use a plate, I would say, well, if you're going to use spaghetti and you want to use sauce, that would become more of a red item. So red and white with the spaghetti inside a plate. You might want to use a contrasting plate. So if it's red sauce, you don't want to use a red plate, you'd want to use a white plate to make the contrast. If, like my son, you want to eat spaghetti with butter, which for some reason kids do, that would be a white plate. That would not be helpful because the spaghetti would be white. So you'd want to use a red plate. So you want to think of contrasts or things like black and white. So if you look at a table setting and you have white plates on a white tablecloth, everything's going to wash out. So you'd want to use something contrasting, either a contrasting plate or a contrasting tablecloth to be able to tell the difference from where the plate is from where the table is. And you can use contrast in a lot of different areas, but we find a lot of things that are helpful for people in contrast in everyday life, such as, if someone needs to find a specific bed in an assisted living facility, they can put a blanket or a throw over the edge of their bed that's contrasting with the comforter to tell their bed is different than their roommate's bed. So it gives contrast. And we also talk about things with people when they're eating. Pouring is another big issue. We use what's called a liquid level indicator. It's a little device that has a 9-volt battery that you can actually hang onto the edge of a cup. It has 2 prongs, and those prongs sit inside the cup. And when you pour the liquid inside the cup, the liquid rises from the bottom. It touches those 2 prongs and it either makes a sound or it vibrates so that the person knows to stop pouring. So this way it's an audible and a tactile way, and sometimes a visual way for someone to know that if they keep pouring, they're going to overspill. So again, something very simple, rather than using your finger, because if you're diabetic and you don't have any feeling, you don't want to stick your finger into a hot cup of coffee. You might not feel it and get burned. It's also not very sanitary. So this actually takes the place of them having to use their fingers to tell how high a cup is when it's being filled.
Well, in terms of contrast, thank goodness for Fiestaware with its nice colorful colors and giving you all those options to mix and match to have high contrast resolution. And do you provide that apparatus that sits in the glass for the consumer?
Yes, we do. We provide it for somebody if they're in need and if they're able to use it and it's appropriate. Yes, we do.
Great, great.
One of the other things that we talk about with people is writing, because a lot of people have difficulty with writing or printing. So we generally use large print paper, bold pens, and also writing guides. So something simple like a check guide or a signature guide to be able to sign their name so their name isn't going uphill or downhill is also very relevant. So very simple things that we can use that most people we talk to have issues with their appliances or something eating or writing or even lighting. We talk to people about their lighting needs. Whenever you increase the lighting, it can help you to see better, but can also increase glare. So we have to talk about increasing one while, making sure that we adjust for the needs for them and what they're able to do and make themselves most independent.
Good. Good.
I think Susana has some other things that she can talk about too.
Great.
Yes, I do. So Eric, some of the things that we also sometimes take for granted is just looking up at the clock when it's up on the wall. And so we address timepieces very often with our clients, and our consumers have become quite savvy with using things like asking Alexa the time and using a cell phone, with Siri. But they are still our more traditional folks who need, a traditional watch or a timepiece. We usually provide whatever is appropriate for the individual. So something that has a date and time announcement, they just press a simple button. Sometimes when I go to a nursing home, the part that they're concerned with is, where am I going to put this? I'm going to lose it. They don't always have a pocket. We attach it to a lanyard. It's a keychain type of timepiece. So that's usually very helpful and very relevant because they can take it with them wherever they are. It's always on their person. We also sometimes go into low vision type of clocks, nice large 2.5-inch type of LCD displays, either in red or in green, depending on the consumer. We do assess for that just to be sure that they have the best outcome for being able to see. Because sometimes they say, well, my spouse sleeps next door and I don't want to press the button and have it talk out loud. Even if it's appropriate and they have enough usable vision, we show them a clock with big numbers, and that tends to solve the issue. So we also address, orientation of calendars, the date, they have appointments. We all live in a very appointment oriented world, right? Where we want to be able to know when our doctor's appointments are going to be, a birthday of a family member, when MCB is coming to visit. So we want to make sure that we give them the tools to be able to keep those. So we give them a very large wall calendar with nice large boxes and a dark pen. We take for granted that we just use a regular pen right in the calendar. I had this woman who had that exact scenario. Her husband wrote in the calendar that we provided. I'm like, we have to use a dark bold pen, the one I provided, because even if you write it on there, she can't see it. But if you write it in a bold pen, like a Sharpie, she's more likely to see it because of that contrast that Carolyn had mentioned. So tracking appointments, very important, right?
Yeah, very much so. And again, contrast seems to be something that will be a major piece of any rehabilitation because it's just going to make things stand out, of course. Yeah.
Correct. And that brings me to my next point, which is discussing glare and even types of eyewear that we provide. I don't provide, prescription glasses. That's not my forte. They have a special place for that. But we do help them manage lighting and contrast. So someone who is outdoors tends to have a pair of sunglasses, but they don't always consider that if it's somebody with macular degeneration and has peripheral vision, they have all that light, coming right through their windows when they're going to their doctor's appointment, and their son is bringing them over and they're like, oh, I can't see very well. So we provide glasses that have side protection as well as the traditional front. So, and they fit over their own glasses or eyewear they're using, which is a benefit for a lot of our consumers. And even when they are indoors, there are certain consumers that have difficulty with glare when they are sitting in a space and they have overhead lighting. We don't always take that into account, or maybe they're sitting facing the window and they just can't see. Everything is just too bright. It's washed out. We address that and provide them the right kind of, fit over sunglasses that manage that. Watching television. A lot of people say big screens are the best thing, except for when you're in the dark and all you have is that bright light just coming into your face. And then you don't really see a whole lot, even if it's big, in a big size, because you're not managing the emission of all of that light that's coming through. So glare and managing that with a contrast makes a big part of what we do, with our consumers in terms of helping them.
Yeah, I never knew blue blockers would be so popular and useful.
That
All
is
the trips to
correct.
Florida with all the folks driving with the baseball caps and the blue blockers on the side.
That's
Now
right.
I know a little bit more about how useful that can be.
That's right, because headwear is also a part of it. Use that little visor. You don't want to just have to go play tennis to have that, to protect you. And the other part that is so instrumental in the independence of our consumers is just assistive devices, vision aids. You're so used to going to the pharmacy. If your vision's starting to change a little, you grab a regular magnifier and you're like, oh yeah, now I can see just fine. However, once you are declared legally blind and you're with our agency, you've come to find that a lot of those magnifiers are no longer helpful. I have consumers that have a couple in the drawer. Oh, they don't help me. My daughter bought me one and it doesn't help. So that's where we come in to really use the expertise that we have. I perform an evaluation of their functional vision to determine what kind of vision aid is appropriate and discuss their goals. Some people think of reading as reading, a book or a magazine. We understand that when your vision is so advanced, like the way it is with a lot of our consumers, we have to explore other options, right? We talk about books for listening, right? Listening to books. Your program is wonderful. They use their Alexa, and Audible Local Ledger allows them to listen to important information in their community. So it's not always about a vision aid that you're going to see, but we assess to figure out what's the best for device for them to use for reading their mail, maybe, taking care of their finances, seeing a photograph of a family member that they love and they just can't see their facial expressions very well. And now they're using the right vision aid to be able to do that. Reading the Bible. There are some people, believe it or not, who with the right kind of vision aid, they're successful at being able to read with their vision. It's very client centered. We have to treat each individual one person at a time.
Yeah, bespoke solutions for everybody is probably what would be best. And certainly in the assistive technology field, we understand that because not only are we giving out smart speakers like the Echo Dot, but we also have radios that are tuned to just us. So all you have to do is turn it on and you will get our live feed. We have podcasts now that Siri can call up. We have ways of streaming online. We have mobile apps that they can access. We try to make it so that there is accessibility for even the most isolated individual so that they can feel connected to the community and reading local news, local town meeting, local obituaries, shopping guides, things that commercial TV and radio will not give you, plus a lot of fiction and things at night that might be a little lighter, which again, don't cost anything, but give them some entertainment that might be a little bit more rewarding than what might be on commercial TV or radio. So understood that it is a very, and to your point, we have to talk to the person and know how comfortable are you with any of this technology? Are you aging into a technology savvy time in your life, or are you someone who just needs a radio that you can turn on and not have to worry about a computer or turning on anything else? And that takes us just talking to them. And quite candidly, is there someone young around you who can help you? Because with that is the smart speaker and the computers and all of that. So much respect for what you have to train, which is life skills, because I know how tricky it can be just to get them to be able to hear us. So slow clap for your team.
Thank you.
So I'm curious. Thank you for outlining that, both of you. How how do you go about becoming a rehabilitation teacher? Massachusetts is known for having terrific services compared to many other states, which struggle with services for the disabled. Are schools in Massachusetts known for this specialty? Is this a specialty? How would you get trained in it to be able to go into this career?
So a lot of the individuals who end up working for MCB as rehabilitation teachers have a varied background, but most of those have a few commonalities. So their backgrounds in human services, whether it be psychology, sociology, social work, nursing, PT, and OT, occupational therapy, being the larger ones, because generally in those areas and those scope of work, you're working with individuals with multiple disabilities, and you're not focused on one specific disability. So how people kind of funnel and end up getting to MCB as rehab teachers is sort of that way. We've been around for quite a long time at MCB with rehab teachers, and as such, the educational system has evolved in that. And people aren't working with people who are just blind. So our individuals have secondary and tertiary issues. They may have COPD, they may have diabetes. We don't walk into someone's house and just say, oh, you're visually impaired, you're legally blind, let's just deal with your vision, because there might be other obstacles that we're dealing with. So someone who has a varied background in that is much more amenable to working as a rehab teacher because they understand the physical disabilities, the mental inabilities for them to be able to accept their vision loss with the social work piece. So it's kind of a whole approach. There are schools in Massachusetts, actually. The course of school that you would go to is at UMass Boston. And the University of Massachusetts Boston has a specific program for vision rehabilitation therapy. And it's a program that offers both a certificate and a full vision studies master's in education. So UMass Boston has a track where if you go, you can get your master's in education, you can do vision rehabilitation therapy, you can become a teacher of the visually impaired, or you can do orientation and mobility, all three of which actually end up working with people who are low vision, legally blind, in that manner, not just for MCB, but all across the country. People from different states go to UMass Boston. And the program at UMass Boston focuses on helping individuals with vision loss enhance their vocational abilities, their independent living skills, and educational development. And the track itself for the vision rehab therapy teaches professionals how to evaluate and teach everyday skills for the safe and independent living. And it has a certificate program. So if you have a degree in something else and you want to take that certificate program, you don't have to be enrolled for the master's in education for the vision rehab therapy. You can take the vision rehab therapy certificate program if you have the undergraduate qualifications. And again, it helps working with people who are visually impaired, legally blind, and getting into that scope of practice. So we have a couple of individuals with us who have the certificate program, and also other individuals who have been rehabilitation teachers for a long time. I happen to have a master's in education with a specialization in orientation and mobility, but I qualify for those exact courses if I wanted to go back and get the certificate in vision rehab therapy, because I've taken the core courses. So at our agency, we don't require people to have that, but it's very helpful if they do, because obviously it's a funneled way for being able to work with people and teaching them specific skill sets.
Wow, that's great. And UMass Boston sounds like it has a very flexible and somewhat fluid program to allow people to really explore this, even if it isn't something they know much about, but they're interested in. And it's also a good transition into the next question I have, which I think is pretty important. Understanding where you enter the process with other MCB services like orientation and mobility and vocational rehabilitation, and outlining the process and where you become involved. It helps demystify the journey. This is a big part of what we're trying to do here. Aging seniors in our different regions, well, they are about to go through a transition, and knowing what's in store, how there are services to help them, I think probably helps alleviate some of their fears. So we have talked to a lot of different services at MCB. Where do you fit in your timing and interaction with the others? And I assume that at some point there's some group think going on with everybody kind of talking to each other to make sure that this client is fully kind of realized in terms of each need. And then where do you enter into the process?
So the process is tricky in some ways, but also streamlined in others. So what I say by that is that the process of working with MCB is that you need to be legally blind. So you need to first meet those criteria of being 20 over 200 or worse in your best corrected eye, or a peripheral vision loss of 10 degrees or less. So that's the first step, is getting registered. And then once somebody is registered, depending on their age and where they're at in their stage of life, they go off into two programs. So they'll either be going into the VR, or the vocational rehabilitation tract, or the social rehabilitation, or SR tract. And again, there's nuances in each of these, but the broad scope is that if you are not working, if you're not interested in work, and if you are not in school, then you're going to be categorized as social rehab or working with SR individuals. So you'll be assigned a case manager once you're registered, and that case manager will come out and they'll talk to you. When they talk to you, again, all these services are completely voluntary. They'll come out and they'll talk to you, and they'll discuss the services that MCB has, both in-house and then what programs are available outside the scope of MCB that we can refer out to. So a few of the programs in-house that MCB has are rehabilitation teaching, assistive technology, and orientation and mobility. So those three subsets are available to anyone who is legally blind in the agency, whether they're a child, they're an adolescent, they're a VR consumer, or they're elderly, or anywhere in between. So rehab teaching actually goes the whole entire span of someone's life. Because as a child, you might need to learn to do specific things like tie your shoes or get ready to be able to cook and then live on your own. And if you're an elder, you may need to relearn those skills now that you've become legally blind and you need to learn them in a new way. So we work with individuals who, whether they're in the VR tract and they're going to work and they need their workspaces identified to be more amenable, or they're in their homes, or they have to transition to an assisted living or a nursing home, we work wherever they might be at. So we come in after a social worker or a VR counselor has spoken to the individual and they've decided that this is something that would help them be more independent. So the social worker or the VR counselor will then make the referral to the rehab teaching program, which comes to me, and then we'll assign it to one of my teachers based on where they live. So we have catchment areas. So the Cape and Islands is one catchment area, down around the Attleboroughs and Easton area is another teacher, and then up where Susana is the Kingston, Stoughton, Brockton area. So it all depends on where you live, is which teacher you'll be assigned to. And then my rehab teacher will come out, they'll talk to you, and they'll figure out where best that you have those needs to be met to be most independent. Sometimes a social worker or a VR person will go out and talk to a person and offer all these services, and someone won't be ready for it. And they'll say, I'm not really sure. This is very overwhelming. You're telling me a lot of information, and I only want very specific things right now. Like I'd like the phone from the Mass Equipment Distribution Program, and I'd like a cane, and I'd like to be able to get around to my neighborhood, and that's it. And once they get more familiar and they become more independent in those areas, they might circle back with the case manager, the SR worker or the VR worker, and say, you know, you said something about somebody who could provide me things to be more to make things easier for my life. You talked about timepieces, you talked about writing. I think I want to try that now. So that's when they would just refer it to the rehab teaching department, and the process would go where I'd assign it to a teacher. So it's not ever one-stop shopping, like you either take the service now or you don't get it later. You can have the service anywhere in your process of being registered with us and working with us at any time. And to that point, if your vision changes, if you've been legally blind and your vision is pretty good and you're doing well and you feel like you're doing well, you don't need rehab teaching, and a year from now your vision changes for some reason, you can call us and request a teacher to come out and either reevaluate your skills or reteach you how to do something if you've forgotten.
So you're never locked in. It's an evolving process. It can be an evolving process and probably usually is, which makes an awful lot of sense.
We have a lot of people who they don't really, they're very overwhelmed with their diagnosis at first and being registered. And there's a lot of information that we provide to them with their benefits. And so having someone else then come into the house to teach them, or someone else come in to give something, is a little too overwhelming at first. So generally they might work with a social worker or a VR counselor for a little while they're adjusting to all of their blindness issues. And then maybe a few months down the road, we'll get a rehab teaching referral. Or it could be a year from now. So it really all is dependent on where the person is at in their journey.
Yeah, it's something that we wrestle with quite a bit in terms of trying to make sure that we are presented in some way to that person, but it's probably going to come at a time when they are at somewhat anxious. And I'm not sure if something like, oh, there's a reading service for you would register if I was trying to take in all of the other information that you're giving to us. So often I use this phrase a lot. I feel like we're a beautiful billboard, but in a basement. And then when people can finally find us, they're usually pretty happy. It's free and we're giving them something. We just don't know how to find them. Obviously, we can't track them down in any real way because of HIPAA laws, things like that. But we're trying to help all the time and find hub and spokes to try and find maybe clergy or somebody who knows other people who can then pass out the word. But trying to get them to understand that there is a service, it's free, it will be helpful, and we're here to pick up the phone if somebody does need to call and get help. Something that I can understand that anxiety in that first couple of consultations, and that maybe some people just aren't ready for it. Look, I just need the basics. Can you get me there? I get it. So, what are each of your goals for this year? It sounds like every day is a new goal for you because you have new challenges and new people and new innovations coming. Technology is developing quite a bit around much of this. Do you feel like you have the tools to reach these goals that you set for yourself? And these tools being the two most important, budget and headcount. With so much unemployment as low as it is, are you fully staffed? And do you have the funding to be able to do what you want to do?
Well, I can speak to, advancing my own education, right? Getting my skill set up to par is always going to be a process. So joining some of the CSD trainings that are being offered through our agency is definitely something that I plan on continuing to do. Putting out some more public education and in-services out in the community. I have to be honest, it's not my favorite thing. Public speaking and me, I don't know. It's a thing that I'm slowly working on as I'm here, waving my hands like I'm a nervous Nilly, but I understand that that's a very important aspect of growing as a person, growing as an individual here at the agency, and that's my future endeavor. I don't know if Carolyn wants to speak to the whole budget aspect because she's more in line as a supervisory role. She
Sure.
handles more of that aspect of things.
What I can say, Eric, is we'd always love more staff and we'd always love more money, and we welcome both. In
Well
my
said.
in my region, I am thankful to have 4 rehabilitation teachers, which is one more than we had a few years ago. We were able to add a staff member last year. Through, retirements and state budgets and things, we've lost some staff, but we diligently try to do as best we can in building our staff back up. The caseloads that we have, in my opinion, and I think I would say of my other teammates, is we could always use another rehab teacher because we don't just work with people and it's not counting beans. It's working with a person. So a person's needs today may be different than they are next week. They have physical, emotional, social aspects to their lives. You might come into somebody's home and today they're having a really bad day and they're just not physically able to retain as much as you had hoped to teach them, which means you're going to have to come back again and probably reteach them something, and it's going to put you further out. So teachers, it's not a one-stop shopping and you have to meet people where they're at. So I would advocate and always love to say the agency can always utilize more rehab teachers. That's a conversation well above my pay grade and, well at the state house office level and, et cetera. But I would never say no to another rehab teacher in any part of my agency, whether it's my region or anywhere else. We're a tightly knit group, not just in my region, but we try to stay connected across the state. And try to understand that what people's needs in the Southeast region is not the same as what somebody in Western Massachusetts has, because they're a total socioeconomic different, group that we work with. As far as money, again, I would love to say, we will take as much money as we can. And I try to do the best that I can by my team and by the consumers by utilizing the resources that I have. It's a tough time when we're told, we don't know what money we'll have, we don't know what we won't have, but I do the best with what we've got. And I think it's been a long time that I've said to somebody, I can't get you that item because we don't have the money. We've been fortunate enough to try to get as much money as we can and make every dollar count, even with the higher priced items, even with the tariffs coming in. I try to do my due diligence as best I can with whatever people need. There are times, unfortunately, that we don't have the equipment that we can provide to people. There are very expensive pieces of equipment that many people could use, such as a desktop CCTV, but that's a $3,000 piece of equipment that's really just out of the reach of the agency to be able to provide for everyone that may need it, that may qualify. So we try to do our best to meet the needs of everyone in the best way possible. We reuse equipment, we take it back from people, we provide it to individuals. And, The only time that I might be able to say I can't get that right now is just that hiccup between fiscal years where we kind of have a close of a fiscal year and an open of a fiscal year where I say, I just can't get that for you right now. And it might just be, another month before my budget opens. But generally, the agency's really good about, if I say to John or Justine or anybody that, hey, we need money for this, they do their best to get it to us for supplies to be able to meet the needs of our consumers.
Sure, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. And having worked in some school systems myself, I know the difference between teaching a class of 12 and teaching a class of 40. It is it is a very different situation, and I have a lot of respect for all of you and your team. So, thank you for so much about the actual work you do. But here at MCB Community Update, we close with some personal questions, not too personal, but some personal questions to get to know what you're doing off the clock. So, who is your favorite musical artist or group? And what's your first and then your favorite concert that you've been to?
Well, I guess I can start with this one. So I like a whole variety of music, but Billy Joel is my classic go-to when it comes to, some of the older type of music. And then more of the contemporary artists that I enjoy is Jason Mraz, Adele with her vocals. And most recently, the contemporary artist I'm obsessed with is Teddy Swims. So those are some of the, the genre of music that I tend to listen to. Now, my first concert was when my daughter was very young, and it was Celine Dion. She came over to what used to be the Boston Garden, that is now not even the Boston Garden as it's named. And we went to watch Celine Dion, who is just an idol, in her own right. She's a diva, but she's beautiful in her voice. And my favorite concert is Stick Figure. And a little background, Stick Figure is a reggae artist, and he actually has roots in our own Duxbury, Mass. He attended the Duxbury High School, and he decided to go over to the West Coast where he launched his career. And now he comes here and does performances at, Xfinity Center. He likes a lot of outdoor venues. The Great Woods, for those of us old people who remember what it used to be called. Oh,
The Theater Center.
yeah, Xfinity Center it is now. I'm losing track. Every time there's a new name, I'm like, oh no, something more to remember in my brain, When I was 25, it was a little easier. I won't disclose my age now, but I'm not 25, and it's getting a little harder to retain new venues, but the idea is just, we enjoy music very much in our household, and we listen to it all the time. So thank you for asking.
This would be the choir in terms of forgetfulness. So I'm totally understanding. How about you, Carolyn?
So I actually am a huge country music fan. I have always loved country, even when it wasn't popular. I loved country, and it wasn't popular to love country when I was in high school. So I loved it then, and I still love it now. It was also something that I could play with my son, and I didn't have to worry about the lyrics or have to worry about some of the messages. So, that has been something that has kind of been ingrained in me. And anybody who knows me knows that I absolutely love Kenny Chesney. I have been a huge Kenny Chesney fan since he hit way back in the day. And I was fortunate enough to see him in concert, literally had my hands on the stage and I could touch him. That's how close I was. And I didn't need speakers to listen to the music. I saw the set list, and it was probably one of the most amazing concerts because Kenny is a performer in and of his own right. He's not just about the songs, but he's about the people, about the vibe. I'm a beach person. I'm a good vibe, just, kind of kick back, whatever, enjoy in my spare time. So yeah, my first concert, believe it or not, was New Kids on the Block way back in the day.
NKOTB.
NKOTB. But yeah, no, I tend, and I listen to all kinds of different music. I do know Teddy Swims. I enjoy Teddy Swims. I know Adele. I know Gwen Stefani. But my go-to is generally country because it's just easier to put on in the car or in the house, like I said, and I don't have to worry about maybe some lyrics that might have slipped up to get into my child's eardrums that I didn't put there.
Well,
I too am a fan. I am a fan also of Kenny Chesney, just not in the scope of where I'd want to see sweat beads falling down his face. I don't need to be that up close and personal, but
If I could get on a plane to Vegas right now and see him in concert in Vegas, that would be fantastic. Just to see him in a different element. But I'm blessed to have seen him when I did, and it was a fantastic show. So yeah.
Well, you were close enough to touch him. I won't ask if you did.
He high-fived me. No, he did. He high-fived me. Yep. Yep.
Oh, wow. Well, okay. So thank you both so much for your time. A lot of information, really, really good, specific information. One of our most detailed podcasts and conversations that we've had on MCB Community Update. I'm very grateful for that, and I'm sure many will find this very helpful. So I think you did a good turn today.
Hope so.
Listeners, if the subjects of rehabilitation, orientation, and mobility, assistive technology, or MCB's registration process is interesting to you, you want to know more, we have produced specific podcasts and webinars on each one of these subjects, and they can be found wherever you're listening to this, or if you have vision, wherever you're watching this. Be sure to join us next month when we speak with Employment Services Supervisor Carol Collins on the Summer Internship Program, the 80th anniversary of National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and several other topics. Until then, bye for now.